welcome back to the Chronicles of Football. This week we're going to be talking about the Champions League. So let's get right into today's episode. Alright, so before we start today's episode, I'm just going to have to give a fair warning to the listeners. I am sick and my voice tends to get a little nasally. So just a fair warning. I don't want anyone having any surprises. But yeah, anyways, getting into today's video, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Champions League, and obviously we're going to correlate that to the MLS in North America, including Ontario, obviously, because that's where we're based. Anyways, how does the Champions League correlate with North America, or the MLS to be specific? If you guys don't know how the MLS tier system works, is pretty much it's divided into conferences. So you have the East and you have the West. The East obviously plays against the teams that are in the East. For example, Toronto FC would play against New York and like Miami or Florida, I should say. Uh, and the West, obviously, like Vancouver, LA, all these different teams on the West. And for me, this is very interesting because it's directly based off of the NBA, like the way that it's created. Because and then it goes into the top four, and then the top four from each conference at the end of the season play in a tournament style where they do quarterfinals, semis, and then uh, final, obviously. And I feel this is one of the reasons why football isn't as big as it is here in North America, is because it's based off of basketball, and you have all these teams. And I feel that people who actually enjoy football, that is European, Asian, South American, African, whatever it is, anywhere around the world, it's all points based. And don't get me wrong, it's points based here. A win is 3 points, a tie is 1 point. If you lose, 0 points. You don't get a point that week. And then obviously the team with the highest points by the end of the season wins the league. And to have it in a way where you could win all your games, go to a playoffs, and then lose in the quarterfinals against a team that's in a different conference, it doesn't make any sense to me. Uh, just because it's a completely different concept than any other league. Like if you take the English Premier League, they they are currently like having a battle between Liverpool and Manchester City. Especially this past weekend, they had a game, Liverpool and Man City, and that was a very popular game. In any sense, they're not rivals, but they're both first and second, and there are only 1 point that's separating them. As it's getting towards the end of the season, that game matters a lot because if Liverpool wins, they're 2 points ahead of Manchester City. If Man City wins, they're like 5 points ahead of Liverpool. So it's and that's for first place, you know. And so that's why it becomes so interesting. But if that was, for example, first and second place, and let's say if Liverpool wins, that doesn't matter because they're gonna go to the playoffs. If that was in North America, because Man City's still gonna go to the Liverpool to the playoffs. So is Liverpool. Doesn't matter if they're first, second, third, or fourth. They're going to the playoffs, and I feel like that's why the enthusiasm isn't here, especially in North American football. Because as long as you're top four, who cares? You're gonna go to the playoffs, and then people start watching. And I feel like they're trying to relate it to the NBA and to the basketball as much as possible, to engage people. But I feel like that's where it's hurting them the most because if there are people that enjoy European football, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people, including myself, and I'm sure including all of you guys who are listening. It is one of the downfalling reasons why I feel they haven't succeeded as much as they can here in North America. But besides that little rant, let's talk about the Champions League. I feel like if we had some sort of a tournament like the Champions League, like in Europe, Asia, that have these tournaments where they play against different teams from different countries. So, for example, if we just think about last week's games, Bayern Munich versus Villarreal. Villarreal is like a mid-tier team in Spain versus Bayern Munich, which is a giant in German football, and they played last week in the quarterfinals, and Villarreal won 1-0 against Bayern Munich. And That's why this sport is so amazing. You just see teams, especially in the Champions League, you see teams that you would have never seen before play against each other and play. And who would have ever thought that Villarreal would have beat Bayern Munich? It's such a crazy upset, and like it's especially for Bayern Munich fans that are so used to winning, to lose to like not such a prominent team in Spanish football. Or let's talk about a different team that played Chelsea versus Real Madrid. Chelsea, English team, Real Madrid, Spanish team. Real Madrid won 3-1 at Chelsea's home stadium, and now tomorrow they're playing their second leg. We talk about the other teams that actually played in the quarterfinal. Liverpool and Benfica played in Portugal, which is Benfica's home, and Liverpool is English. Liverpool won 3-1. And then on Wednesday this week they're playing the second leg. Atletico Madrid, Man City, they played in England. Man City's English, Atletico Madrid is Spanish. And don't get me wrong, there's teams from Russia, Turkey, Portugal, England, Italy, all the European giants and any other teams that you can think of are in this tournament. As long as they finish top two, they get put into this tournament and they play against each other. And I feel like this is something, instead of having a playoffs for the MLS, where the Western Conference, the top four, Eastern Conference top four play against each other for the league. We put all our teams into one conference, and then whoever's number one wins the league, like any other league in the world. And then we take that concept of a conference and we make it into a Champions League kind of thing, right? Where we can have South American teams from Mexico, teams from possibly Greenland, Iceland, because they're fairly close to us. Some South American teams like Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Ecuador, Cuba, Caribbean teams, all these that are like close to us, not necessarily physically, but like their land masses are somewhat connected. It would be quite hard to have a Champions League with Europe, as you got to fly across the ocean, such like that. But if we I feel like that would be something that can definitely connect us, and especially if FIFA backs it, we can have some sort of a, instead of a European Champions League, we can have like some, I don't have a name off the top of my head, but some sort of a tournament that could connect South American football, which is very prominent, with a lot of talent, and North American football, which is on the come up, with great players, great talent that is starting to show itself. And not only that, but the fans start getting connected to different teams. I have an uncle, and he supports Toronto FC, and he doesn't watch the games, but he follows them on Instagram, and he checks the Twitters and stuff. Oh, they won. Oh, this, that. And every time European football is happening, he hears about it. So he asks me like, oh, I heard Paris Germain versus Bayern Munich. Well, what's happening in the Champions League? Something like that. And he keeps asking me about it. And so I feel like if we have these kinds of tournaments in our homeland, it could connect those people that are like on the outskirts of the sport. Because if my uncle, who doesn't watch any games and hears about European football and asks me, which obviously I know about it, uh, now imagine if it was in our own country. He would have to watch. He would end up watching, Mexico, a Mexican team versus a Toronto team, or versus Vancouver, for example, or like Uruguay, a Uruguayan team versus a Toronto team. It's it's something that you don't see, something that you won't imagine. When would you have ever imagined like LA Galaxy versus a team in Ecuador? No, because it wouldn't happen. But if we had this tournament, it would. It would catch eyes. It would be something different. It would be something very similar to Europe, but it would be something different that haven't had here. And it's exactly like the Champions League and Europa League, where different countries obviously across Europe, and uh, I feel like one of the problems here would definitely be the transportation, as you know if you can't play in Toronto and then play in like Ecuador the next day, and the Champions League goes on a weekly basis. So these guys are like traveling through Europe, and let's be honest, Europe is pretty small compared to North America alone. Um, so that would be a barrier, but I mean, the basis of it, I think, would be quite interesting to see. Alright, that has been this week's episode of the Chronicles of Football. Make sure to tune in next week for our 5th episode, where we're going to have some interesting developments in the Champions League. Make sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you guys next week.